All righty, we made it. We made it to Friday. The weather's good. Everything's good in the neighborhood. Boom. Oh wait, I think that might be somebody. I'm not going to get sued for that, am I? Isn't that somebody's like tagline or advertising campaign?
Is it?
It's all good in the Big Play neighborhood. How about that? It is the Chico Bormann Show on this Friday. Good to have you along. We got a lot to get to. We are a day away, 1 day away from the 149th Run for the Roses, as Ken Miles would say, and down the stretch they come. And speaking of Ken Miles, our esteemed boss and owner of Big Play, he will be joining us coming up at 2 o'clock. He is in Louisville. Notice again how I say that, Bohm. You know, I had it drilled into my head years ago by a native Louisvillian, and so now like I don't if anybody even says Louisville, I'm like Louisville. They're like, "Oh, are you from there?" I'm like, "No," but I had it drilled in my head. Anyway, really looking forward to talking to Ken Miles. Will get you more importantly in getting up the information for the Kentucky Derby and talking about the Kentucky Derby. I know what you people want. The meat and potatoes. The meat and potatoes being, give me some good odds on a horse, maybe a longer shot horse. And, you know, everybody's talking about Forte, who's the favorite, and I think still is the betting line favorite. Well, that's why we'll have the esteemed, the guy that looks like the Unabomber on our wall, but he is Ken Miles.
Are you going to call him Ted Kaczynski at any point on this show?
No. As long as he continues to sign the checks, I won't be calling him Ted Kaczynski unless he wants me to. If he says no, but I don't think he does. It really does. It's kind of a freakish. Like if you look at it long enough, it'll freak you out. Boom. We got to get a camera. We need a roving camera. Can we?
Should I just turn one of the cameras to it? Just that one, since we're not really using it.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Stand by.
Stand by.
Stall.
Maybe we need to. I hope Dave's listening, watching. I mean, Dave's not doing anything. Can we get a roving camera? Like I can just have one that I can kind of pan the room on so we can see certain things. Freeze frame. We just froze. Is that? Uh-oh. But we're still talking. Hey, we're still going. All right. Anyway, we will be talking Derby in the second hour of the show. As I said, 216-626-7901. You can find us also on Twitter. We stream it live each and every day, Monday through Friday, from 1 until 3 on that old Twitter app, at Chico Show CLE. And then you also want to go onto YouTube and type in the Chico Bormann Show. Hit subscribe. We appreciate it. Had a lot of good feedback yesterday. We had Joe Thomas on the show. Nick Padone did a great job getting some of the clips out, the reels out. We're going to continue to do that. But, you know, if you subscribe to the show, and you'll get all of that stuff very easily. And it's good content, if I do say so myself. But yeah, Joe was outstanding yesterday. Getting some feedback too on the whole Dylan Brooks thing. Like, it's bad when it sounds like Nick Padone is trying to talk me out of Dylan Brooks. I never wanted Dylan Brooks in the first place. I'm just saying that now Dylan Brooks has kind of gone. He's gone from a guy who, like, everybody disliked, and I think still they do, to now, you know what? That whole under any circumstances, that was kind of rough. You didn't need to treat Dylan Brooks like that. And I just think it's funny. But do I want any part of it? No. And the other thing is, too, we'll get to baseball here in a moment because this is a big weekend for the Guardians. The other thing, too, about like adding toughness to a team, boom, why do we always equate toughness to like the goon in hockey, the enforcer in hockey, right? Like you can get a good player, like a heady player, a guy who is a good defender, and we talk about 3 and D, you got to be able to shoot the basketball, okay? If you're just coming in, and that's kind of where Dylan Brooks and Isaac Okoro are one and the same, and Isaac Okoro is a much more well-liked guy and, whatever. But it seems like when anybody ever talks about, like, you need to get tougher, okay, well, you got to bring in either Dylan Brooks, you got to bring in Draymond Green, or you got to bring in Patrick Beverley. Like, where do we go with that? I don't understand. There are other guys out there that don't necessarily have reputations as, like, enforcers or guys that are going to kind of lose their focus and lose their temper. You don't just have to focus on those guys. And fortunately, Kobe Altman is not. Boom. This doesn't look good. We got cords getting unplugged here live during the show.
We're fine.
You're starting to look like me the first week of the show.
If you didn't say anything, nobody would have known. We're on the air. We're doing fine.
Don't tell me that. I would know.
You really want to give everyone that peek behind the curtain?
It depends on what that peek's going to look like. No, we don't. It's all right. It's all right, Bo. I'm not. It's not your fault. I'm just saying. You had me a little concerned there when I saw a cable in your hand and you didn't quite know where to put it.
We're doing fine. I'm just toggling something.
Toggling. Okay. Well, you can continue to toggle, and I'll continue to try to navigate the show here. All right, Guardians. All right, I'm not going to overstate it. I'm not going to try to dramatize this because it is May. Okay, it's Cinco de Mayo, by the way. Happy Cinco de Mayo to all of you. After we all celebrated the nerdy Happy 4th or May the 4th be with. No, that's all right. If that's your thing, that's okay. But Cinco de Mayo, May the 5th. Still very early, very, very early in the Major League Baseball season. We've played 31 games. The Guardians are 14-17. Minnesota Twins are 17-14. Well, wouldn't you know it, the Minnesota Twins are in town tonight to start a 3-game series, and for the Guardians, also beginning a 9-game homestand. So I am usually... And again, I don't think I'm exaggerating this or dramatizing this by any stretch of the imagination, but they've got to start getting their asses in gear. Like this weekend, let's take 2 out of 3. I know that's easier said than done. And by the way, one of the things that's really propelled the Minnesota Twins, this starting rotation, Sonny Gray is like leading everybody in ERA. He looks like a Cy Young candidate a month into the season. I think they're going to get Joe Ryan, too, this weekend. They don't get Pablo Lopez. He started out very well. The guy that they got from Miami had one bad outing. But that rotation for the Twins has been great. Now you say, well, that's not a good matchup for a Guardians offense that has not been doing anything. Yeah, well, that's got to change this weekend. Weather's going to warm up. Sun is shining. I don't know how, everybody's calling for – bring up this guy and get rid of this guy and do this and do that. And, I think Tito's got a pretty good handle on this. Many people are calling for Ahmed Rosario to be dropped in the order or dropped altogether. Call up Brian Rocchio if you can do that or if they should do that. All I know is the bat's got to get going. Forget about call-ups and demotions. The guys that are in this lineup on a regular basis got to start we got to start hitting the baseball. And hopefully a few of those leave the yard, but if nothing else, you got to start stringing together some hits. You got to start, because when you don't do that and you're not a big power team, it's an ugly, ugly combination. But this is a Yeah, this is a big early series for the Guardians beginning tonight against the Minnesota Twins. As I said, Minnesota 17-4 to begin the season here, a month in, and these bats got to start waking up. So hopefully, this will be a series, because if they don't, and all of a sudden 3 turns into 5, or God forbid 6 in the division, is it insurmountable? No, but then you start getting into that. Okay, a young lineup that is already prone to pressing and swinging at bad pitches, which again last year they didn't do. Now is going to start to press even more because, well, hey, we lost another series, and we're not where we should be. And so, I want to change this with one at bat. I want to do this. I want to do that. And now all of a sudden you're not hitting anything. Now all of a sudden you're not a disciplined team at the plate. Now all of a sudden you're not, getting on base, period, as we've seen. And that is not this Guardians team, or at least not the Guardians' MO. So it needs to change. What better time to change than this weekend, starting tonight, Bailey Ober against Peyton Battenfield. It's not going to be easy. Like I said, you've got some pretty good matchups with Gray and Ryan on the bump for the Twins, but they've got to get things going. 216-626-7901. Again, 216-626-7901. And on Twitter, you can personally reach me, Boom, at Big Play Chico. Also the show at Chico Show CLE. How we doing over there, Boom? See, I always laugh, or at times I'll be like, what, Bohm? You're smiling, you laugh. But at least when you're in that giggly schoolgirl sort of mode, I know everything's good. When you have a very serious look on your face, I get a little nervous. Now, I know I've got to be professional, and the show goes on, and the show does go on, but I got to make sure my boy, what's going on with your boy, Bohm? What's going on with your boy? What is going on with my boy Bohm? How you doing, man?
Nowadays, I feel like I have to intentionally try not to giggle to myself so I can get stuff done.
You know it's coming. Yeah, you know it. You know it's coming.
I gotta be ready for it. But no, I'm just doing some prep for Fair or Foul.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Very, very
trying
important.
to get a good Friday edition of Fair or Foul for the Chico Bormann Show.
Where did that come from?
I have no idea.
All right. It's Friday, it's Cinco de Mayo. Do you celebrate Cinco de Mayo? You going to go get some margaritas? What is the drink of choice, by the way, for Cinco de Mayo? Now, long ago, I definitely participated, but is it, I know a lot of people just go to a Mexican restaurant, get some margaritas.
It's either margaritas or maybe some cerveza or tequila.
What's up with this inflection now in your voice all of a sudden?
I've been practicing.
Well, keep practicing.
I know.
It's all right. That kind of threw me for a loop. Not going to lie. NBA playoffs. I don't know if Bohm, did you watch any of the game last night?
Yeah. Once it got out of hand a little bit, I stopped watching. But
that kind of felt like the vintage Golden State Warriors, right? Where, Steph didn't have to go off, but you had Klay Thompson doing his thing. And when I always feel like nowadays when Klay Thompson starts to get going, or Draymond Green had a great game, damn near triple-double. But I feel like when Klay Thompson starts to contribute, now all of a sudden this feels like a Warriors team from years ago when they were very hard to beat. Steph Curry, first of all, if you go back to that 50-point game that he had, I can't remember how many shots they said he put up. That is not, you look at it and you say, well, it's never like in line with a pitcher, and how many pitches did he throw? Is he at the 100 pitch threshold, whatever? In football, you got to make sure your camp arms are okay and he's not throwing too much. You put up that many shots, your arm's going to be sore. You would think. Then again, Steph Curry is kind of, not human. but getting some help last night, which I thought was big. Tonight we got Philadelphia and Boston. Curious to see how does Philadelphia respond after being, I mean, they weren't just beaten in game 2, which you kind of expected them to get, Boston to come out after game 1. You kind of expected Boston to come out and play well. They did. But now all of a sudden, like, that wasn't just a beating. That was a beat down. That was a behind the woodshed. And Joel Embiid, he keeps mentioning, I don't know if you notice this, Joel Embiid keeps mentioning how his injury is a 4 to 6 week injury. Almost like, I don't like this, by the way, almost like he's making his own excuse if things don't go well. If he doesn't play well, this is the reason why. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does sound like some sort of like back alley excuse, barring a situation where they were to lose embarrassingly. But this is the dynamic that I love about the NBA playoffs, is that, you saw how Golden State lost in game 1, and they punch back in game 2, and they, to your point, the way they respond. And that opportunity in a series to hit back and that back and forth, I think momentum is very real in NBA playoffs. But in some ways, that back and forth and the way that these games, I think that I expect the 76ers to come out really swinging in this one.
Well, Philly's it's gonna be rocking. That place is gonna be nuts, and especially, again, when you look at the beatdown, Boston this wasn't just a 5-point, garden variety, win to tie the series up. And we kind of expected it because game 1 was just the opposite. Now what happens coming back to Philadelphia? It's going to be interesting to see. The other thing is, remember we were talking about Anthony Davis. Like, what did Anthony Davis do in last night's game? Let's look at the box score for old AD. This is why he is without a doubt one of the most frustrating athletes in all of sports. I mean, the guy's talent is unbelievable. He laid an egg. Now, remember, he had a great game in game 1. And you're saying to yourself, well, if Anthony Davis, we looked at 2 guys, just talked about that Philly series. We looked at 2 guys, James Harden for Philadelphia and Anthony Davis for the Lakers. And he said, wow, both those guys can come and play like that in a series. Not necessarily scoring 45 points and everything that those 2 delivered, but just not disappearing in game 2. So what does Anthony Davis do after a tremendous game 1? 11 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 of 11 from the floor, did not attempt a 3. He played 32 minutes of basketball. He had 4 turnovers. He had 3 blocks. But basically, that's not enough. Like, if the Lakers are going to win this series, and a lot of people think they can win this series, but if you're thinking the Lakers are winning this series, you're thinking they're winning the series because Anthony Davis is going to be Anthony Davis, or the Anthony Davis that everybody has been waiting to see and expecting to see. But 11 points after what you did in game 1 isn't going to cut it. And so, that's I don't know. I don't get this guy. And I don't care who wins the series, if it's the Lakers, if it's the Dubs, I don't give a damn. But it's just funny after one game, and we talk about it all the time, the overreaction. We saw it when the Cavs were still in the playoffs. Like, game to game, there can be, huge swings. And, Boston, Philadelphia, the Warriors and the Lakers. But your star players, they've got to be much better. And they've got to be more consistent. And that's, to me, that's the difference. When you talk about the elite guys in the league, they're elite because, for the most part, they're consistent. They bring pretty much, you can expect a certain stat line game in and game out, and definitely in the postseason. But you can't do that with James Harden. You can't do that with Anthony Davis. You just don't know. 216-626-7901. And on the Twitter machine, at Chico Show CLE. So we got the NBA playoffs going. I don't know. Have many people just kind of, since the Cavs are out, does that mean everybody else kind of tunes out too with the NBA postseason? I think there's been some pretty interesting storylines like the ones I just mentioned. So I might not be as glued in as I would be if the Cavs were still in it, but I'm still pretty interested in seeing how these games play out.
There's definitely a lessened interest in it, generally speaking, in Cleveland. I mean,
for you, it sounds like.
No, I mean, I have to imagine for a majority of the fan base. Now, that's not to say that I'm not going to watch these games at all and I'm just dropping basketball, although I have to imagine that a fair fraction of people are. But it's just, I don't care as much. You know, like I liked during the regular season watching other NBA games because I like to stack up how I thought they match up against the Cavs. But now that the Cavs are eliminated, I guess it's not so much like feeling so resentful about it.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to next season already, Chico.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, there's still, I mean, I think there's still some really good basketball left to be played here. I mean, like I said, Philly, Boston, and Golden State and LA. And you know, let's face it, a lot of this didn't go the way that you expected it to go. That's kind of what makes it interesting also. You know, Milwaukee and, how about Milwaukee firing Budenholzer? You know, I wasn't that surprised, though, because even when they won the championship, most fans in Milwaukee, I don't know if you remember this, Bone, but most fans in Milwaukee, when they won the championship, a lot of them were like, yeah, they won in spite of Budenholzer, which I didn't think was necessarily fair at the time, but you knew, like this year and the quick exit, but Giannis was hurt. You know, Budenholzer has never really helped himself because it just seemed like the public sentiment, the public's opinion of Mike Budenholzer was never very high, even when he was doing great things and they were winning a championship. It just never was very high. So not a big surprise there. I know some of the Cavs fans that wanted JB gone are saying, well, hey, if Mike Budenholzer can get fired, then sure as hell JB Bickerstaff. Okay, different situation. Much different situation. Let's just relax a little bit on JB. I think we have. I think now, since the storm has passed, but first time in the playoffs, and you've got a very young team. Now, if they get to next year and there's no progress, and they're not and it's another quick exit, okay, now you have reason to wonder if he's going to stick around. It's kind of like Dwayne Casey with Toronto. But yeah, I think that we get sometimes too caught up. And I mean, look at how many coaches over the last, Nick Nurse with Toronto. I mentioned Dwayne Casey, so that was 2. How many of these coaches will win? Steve Kerr's the only guy that wins, and then a couple years later still has his job. It's like once you win and the expectations go through the roof, kind of like the Cavaliers. But again, they haven't won anything per se, and they're doing it with a young roster that definitely needs to be tweaked. So we shall see. All right. Again, Guardians, big weekend ahead. I think, not just this series. You have a 9-game homestand coming up. You've got the Tigers coming in town. These are games, and this Minnesota series are games that they've got to have. And okay, it's early May, but 14-17 Minnesota, I think I said 17-14, 18-14 they are. But now it's a head-to-head clash. You don't want to fall behind 6-7 games in that division, even if it is May, because again, the tendency is you have young guys that are going to press, are already pressing, and if that is the deficit, now they're gonna press even more. You don't want to see that happen. You just don't want to see that happen. So big series for them. I think I'm going to head up there on Sunday, Bohm, weather permitting. So hopefully they'll be able to get off on the right foot tonight. Ober against Peyton Battenfield. And by the way, Battenfield getting that start in place of Zach Plesac, no big surprise on this end. I wonder with Zach, we've talked about this before, a lot of times Zach Plesac's issues are between the ears. He even admitted as much. Like last offseason, it wasn't so much about working on a particular pitch. It wasn't so much about, my release point or this or that. A lot of what he focused on was focus between the ears and just kind of, being able to relax a little bit. ERA in the 7s, and so he's gonna go down and hopefully try to figure this thing out. So you want to talk about, I know people are panicking, and I know people are saying, this team's done, and I can't stand watching. They're a tough watch right now, but keep in mind 14-17. So they're kind of hanging in there, but they've been without Aaron Savali. They've been without Tristan McKenzie. Now Zach Plesac is sent down, and it wasn't like Plesac was contributing much anyway. So they've kind of been doing this, piecemealing this, just to hang around the 500 mark. And then when we talk about what they've done or haven't done on the offensive end, it makes it even more perplexing. But, yeah, okay, you had a month. Now you got to get going. Now you're home. You're home for 9 games. You start with your division rival, the team you're looking up at in the standings. You got to get going. You got to get this thing done. So hopefully that's the case tonight with them taking on the Minnesota Twins beginning at 7:10. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll play a little fair or foul with Michael Bohm. And then in the second hour of the show, we are talking ponies. We are talking Derby, the 149th Run for the Roses. By the way, Bohm, do you know how much the blanket of roses that gets draped over the winner of the that's why I Run for the Roses, the blanket that gets draped over the winner, the winning horse, do you know how much that thing weighs?
I do not, Chico.
40 pounds.
That's a stat I'm going to keep, and I'm going to drop some knowledge on some peeps.
Good. Yeah, do that this weekend. Maybe it'll I was going to say something, but I won't. But, yeah, 40 pounds. I forget how many roses are on it, like 554 or 550. I'll have to do something.
Now, are they thorned? Do they have thorns? Because I've heard that every rose has a thorn.
Yes, Poison. Every rose does have its thorn. Unskinny.
I don't know if I'd want that many thorns dumped
but I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that's good. You know what I want to know? Because we've seen Ken. Ken was showing pictures of him wearing a fur coat at the boxing event. Has Ken Miles, who will join us in the second hour, has he ever did they let you try on? I mean, this is a big deal. Like, I'm joking about it, but like this blanket of roses is made every year, and it's like, are you allowed to try it on? Are you allowed to, if you're an owner of a horse, are you allowed to kind of, is that one of the privileges you get? You can kind of sneak back there and get your picture taken with the bed of the blanket of roses, or no? Is that completely off limits? Trust me, something tells me if Ken could try on the blanket of roses, he has tried on the blanket of roses. So we'll have to ask him that coming up at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, fair or foul, as the Guardians getting set for a big weekend. NBA playoffs continue to roll on, and the Browns adding some nice pieces, more nice pieces to that secondary. We'll talk about their latest addition back there at the safety position. We'll do that coming up a little bit later in the show. But fair or foul is on the way next. It is the Chico Bormann Show. It is, more importantly, a Friday of the Chico Bormann Show right here on the Big Play Network. All righty, welcome back, Chico Bormann. Oh, we got a plane rolling. I feel like I should get out there with those little white things.
Wait, come back.
What do you think? You think those are like really expensive? Those things that they or is it just?
What are they called? I can look it up on Amazon.
You're thinking about going out there and being an imposter on the tarmac?
Runway lights?
They would
look up runway lights?
Yeah, like the guys that that are like shining them and directing traffic. No, they'd run you right off that tarmac pretty quickly, Boom.
But it could make for a good Halloween costume. Show up at a party.
All right.
Start directing traffic.
Yeah.
Bathroom that way.
We could have a good Halloween party out here at Burke. If
we
the
should.
Powers that be would allow. A lot of fun out here. A lot of room.
Can we rent a runway?
All right. It is Friday. Run for the Roses coming up tomorrow. Top of the hour, Ken Miles, our esteemed owner and, owner of the Ponies. And he's been in the business for a while. Get his thoughts, and more importantly, get his thoughts on the horses he likes, some odds that he likes, because we want to make you some money tomorrow, roughly around 6:45 in the evening. So we'll talk to him coming up in just a bit. But right now, it is time on this Friday edition of the Chico Bormann Show, which you can follow us live on Twitter, Chico Show CLE, and on YouTube. It's time for a Michael Bohm Friday edition of Fair or Foul. Bohm, what do you got?
I'm sorry, Chico. Did you mean Fry-yay?
Yes, Bohm.
Okay, good. Let's start it off.
If that makes you feel better.
All righty. Well, I want to start things off. You started the show talking about the Guardians' woes, basically coming in every facet of this roster right now.
Yeah.
As evidenced in one instance by the designation of Zach Plesac back to AAA. And gosh, I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding like expectations for him, but you really hope that he would come out and show some growth this year. And it's been a rough start for him. So I want to start things off with you, Chico, by asking fair or foul. Zach Plesac will work his way back to the starting rotation by the end of the year.
See, this is tricky on a lot of different levels because it's not just is Zach Plesac going to, get back to where he needs to be, but by the time he does, okay, Tristan McKenzie, let's say, and we hope that, Tristan's going to be ready to go by the end of the month. Fingers crossed, knock on wood here. But if you get Tristan McKenzie back in the rotation, Tanner Bybee and Logan Allen are pitching well. Like, will there be a spot? Aaron Savali is still nursing his oblique injury. We'll see how long that's going to take. But, I want to see Zach get back. I want to see Zach do what, Zach was doing a couple of seasons ago. But even if he does start to work things out, when he does get back, is there going to be a spot for him? There might not be. I mean, if McKenzie's back healthy and, God forbid any more injuries, but if McKenzie gets back healthy and Logan Allen and Tanner Bybee continue to do what they've been doing, I'll say fair. He does find his way back into the rotation, but he might be a spot starter. He might be a reliever at some long. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. There's a lot of questions to be had, and the questions were for Zach Plesac going into the year. Remember, it was Plesac and Savali and Plesac. How are they going to do? Savali was lights out in that first outing, right? So you felt really good. Then, of course, he goes down with injury. Plesac really hasn't been. And now you're feeling like, here we go again from last year. But the reason I say it's tricky is that it's not just on Zach. There might not be a spot for him. And that's a good thing. And I don't mean that against Zach. I just mean that means your young guys are continuing to pitch well. Tristan McKenzie's back healthy. Might not be a spot for him. We'll see.
Yeah, totally. This is a very up-in-the-air question mark because we've seen a lot of injuries already with this starting rotation, and so you have to wonder how much that might factor in going forward.
Yep.
But moving forward here on today's edition of Fair or Foul, our Friday edition of Fair or Foul, I got a few football questions for you, Chico, and I want to kick it off with former Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields.
Of course you want to kick it off with an Ohio State player.
Well, look, Fields had a pretty exciting season. It was very up and down.
He did.
There was one point when he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but a lot of that was done with his legs. He's still never thrown for over 300 yards in his NFL career.
And he didn't have a lot to work with last year either.
That's another big thing that I think needs to be taken into consideration by critics. So with that, I want to ask you, Chico, because Bears head coach Matt Eberflus came out and said in his press conference yesterday, Fields has made great strides with his footwork, and he has high expectations for the young quarterback this season. So fair or foul, Justin quarterback will be, over the course of this upcoming season.
Quarterback?
Justin Fields.
I mean, you're really giving, now if you want to, that's like kind of like Johnny Football.
Did I say
Justin quarterback is my new name now. I'm no longer Justin Fields, I'm Justin Quarterback.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. Because again, you have that love for Ohio State, which I do too, but I mean you can't see clearly sometimes. He is no longer
quarterback.
We'll call him Justin Fields. He's Justin Quarterback. Damn it! All right,
man.
I'm sorry. What was?
Thank you for calling me out on that. I had no idea. That totally went right over my head.
No problem, buddy.
Fair pal.
I'm here for you.
Justin Fields will be a top 10 quarterback in 2023.
Fair. Yeah. I mean he's familiarity's there now. He's confident. He knows that he belongs in the NFL and as one of the better quarterbacks. Now he's got some weapons to throw to. Yeah, I think he will be a top 10 quarterback. And again, you know what I think is interesting about this, and we'll get into this at some point, not necessarily today, but at some point. Like Lamar Jackson, right? Getting his deal, and they'll guarantee every bit for 5 years and whatever. I think teams are much more open to the idea of, look, if we have, like, Anthony Richardson is the great example right now with Indianapolis. We talked about it. Shane Steichen comes over from Philadelphia, where he made Jalen Hurts. And what in large part, what did Jalen Hurts do? Jalen Hurts could hurt you with his. Now, he got much better as a passer, but largely he could hurt you with his legs. And they weren't shy about letting him do that. I don't think the Colts and now Steichen with Indianapolis will be shy about letting Anthony Richardson try that. Same thing here. I think, part of Justin Fields' skill set involves him with his legs. Now, again, I'm not saying you're reckless with it, but I think it's interesting now, teams aren't necessarily shying away. Like, hey, if that's what this quarterback does, because now instead of thinking about, and I think, I don't want to say it's completely changed, but I think teams are much more willing to, instead of looking 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road, just say, you know what? What's our 5-year plan? And your 5-year plan is you want to get to, now, I'm not saying that's all you want out of your quarterback is 5 years, but largely you want a championship. And so I think a lot of teams are taking that shorter look mentality. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I find it interesting, I guess is all I'm saying. That I think Justin Fields is a guy that, yes, he can throw the football, but he can also beat you with his legs like other guys in this league we're finding out. And, we've seen guys kind of have the shackles taken off and the training wheels taken off and just letting them run.
Yeah, and you talked about Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson. I feel like it's safe to say and fair to say, since we're playing fair foul, that Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields had more arm talent than Jalen Hurts did coming out of college. Now, potential-wise, I completely underestimated Hurts, and his arm talent now looks incredible.
Yes, let me just say, I like to use this term. You poo-pooed the idea because I remember saying to you, now I got a little overzealous picking them over Tampa Bay in a playoff game a couple years ago, but I remember you asking me about the future of Jalen Hurts. I'm like, I think Jalen Hurts is going to be a very good quarterback in this league, and you kind of gave me a little you scoffed it. You just laughed it off, Bone.
I didn't see it, Chico. But to be fair, he didn't have it at that point.
You're right.
Anyways, we move on. As I want to ask you, it was interesting. I was reading an article on ESPN.com about like questions for every NFL team, and I saw one for the Browns that said like, "Are the Browns set at defensive end?" And that reminded me of a report that I happened to stumble upon last night, where apparently Ryan Russillo said on his podcast that he thinks Super Bowl champion, Ohio native, former Kansas City Chief, Frank Clark will sign with the Browns. Now, Chico, fair or foul, I want to ask you, Frank Clark will sign with the Browns.
If the money's right, I hate to like use that as the crutch. I think, yeah. I mean, first of all, you've seen the swell of support on social media, Twitter, and whatnot. But Frank Clark is probably going to want a nice amount of money, and I don't know if Andrew Berry is going to be willing to fork that over. I don't know how much. I mean, I really don't know what their caps. I think it's okay, but I don't know. Again, not knowing what his side is looking for, but I could see it. I mean, Cleveland native, we talk about and all that, but and the need is still there. Like I've said this before, I'll say it again. We knew the Browns needed to add not only from an interior lineman standpoint, but from an edge. I mean, all of it. They've got to have a better front line on that defense now under Jim Schwartz. You're never going to have too many of those guys. And if you can have rotational guys, and if you can have guys, think about, and I think Jim Schwartz had this mentality in Philadelphia, and I wonder if I would imagine he tries to take it here to Cleveland. Like, we want to keep fresh legs. So the idea of, man, don't you have enough of those guys? No, because in the end, and when Philadelphia won that championship, won the Super Bowl, how did they do it? Like, they had fresh legs. They were very deep with pass rushers. And, late in games in that playoff run, they had more juice on the defensive side of the ball. They were the ones getting to the quarterback. That'll be the same mindset that I think, Schwartz brings here to Cleveland.
Yeah, totally. And, look, I would love to see them bring in Frank Clark, but I feel like you have to feel good about where this Browns defensive line sits currently. Like, they've brought in a lot of new bodies. Now, granted, there's a lot that needs to be proven. But, yeah, I would love to see them bring in Frank Clark. I could think that would really bolster things, and you feel good about him lining up opposite Miles. I mean,
I would say that too. And I do. There is that vote of confidence that, okay, Jim Schwartz is going to by the way, I'll get to it in a moment, but that Jim Schwartz is going to get the most out of these guys. But like Dalvin Tomlinson, I like that as much as we talk about Obo, and yeah, it's a great signing. I think Dalvin Tomlinson inside is big. The guy that's probably, we keep talking about Cedric Tillman and other guys that they drafted. I would say Ika is probably going to be a guy that, as far as right away, sees the most time and is the most NFL ready. It'll probably be him inside and logging some snaps with Tomlinson. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
I am excited to see what Ika can do too. It just feels like he and Tomlinson, what they have to offer is
big
something
dude.
that this defensive line was lacking.
Yeah, big boy.
In past years. Yeah, so sticking with football, but more so off the field, Tom Brady. I don't know if you saw this report, Chico. He was still playing, I believe, when he agreed to a deal with Fox Sports.
A mega deal.
Yes, 10 years, $375 million. Yeah, so he's apparently having cold feet. He's considering backing out of his deal. Chico, fair or foul, this would be catastrophic to Tom Brady's post-football career if he drops out of this deal.
Catastrophic. Like nobody would trust him. Because here's the other thing. We still, the thing that was so amazing, there was two things that were incredible about that deal. One was the money, obviously. Two was nobody knows how Tom Brady's going to be. I mean, we assume he's going to be good, right? But, like, there is that question. Like, Greg Olsen really improved to the point where a lot of people feel like, hey, even if Brady's coming in, he shouldn't take a back seat to him. Like, Greg Olsen became very, very good. I think I'd much rather hear Greg Olsen. There's a sense of intrigue right now with Tom Brady, but what if he's a flop? I mean, what if he's not willing to, I don't want to say take shots at players, but, you know, every now and then, that's kind of, if you're going to be one of the top analysts in football and a former player, inevitably the time's going to come where you're going to have to, you know, maybe make some uncomfortable statements about maybe some guys that you used to play with or just guys in the league. Will Brady be willing to do that? I don't know. I'm going to say this right now. I think Tom Brady is in the middle of, and I'm not making light of this, I think Tom Brady's in the middle of a midlife crisis, a real life midlife crisis. Like, no joke. He's had so much fame, so much money, and not just from football. Like, I mean, Gisele Bundchen, and, you know, he's always kind of been that guy that flew under the radar. Whether it was growing up in California, even at Michigan, you know, it was, you know, and then he comes out, a 6th-round pick. I think there might be a part of Tom Brady that really doesn't know what he likes, what he wants. And here's the thing, Bohm. He knows he can control, or has controlled for many years, how he performed on a football field. And he controlled it and did it very well. Maybe he's afraid, like, am I in over my head? Maybe he just wants to get away from football. Like, if he's not playing, I mean, when we talk about athletes, not to get long-winded on this, but I know I am. When we talk about athletes that have a hard time walking away from the game, and, you know, well, what do they do to kind of, you'll hear some guys say, yeah, I got into broadcasting, that helped a little bit, I still got the itch. We're talking about the most competitive dude that we've seen in a long time, like the Michael Jordan of football, constantly working, constantly. Well, now all of a sudden that's going to be gone. Is that void going to be enough? Is it going to be filled enough by getting behind a microphone? I don't know. I seriously think this dude is in a midlife crisis.
You know what, Chico? I think you bring up a good point, and I feel like we saw that too, as evidenced by everything that unfolded with Gisele. But then also, like, you can see the stress in his face. Like, you notice how much his cheekbones thinned out. Apparently, that's a sign of, like, enduring a lot of stress. And then just
I wish I'd endure a lot of stress. I mean,
you know, you and me both.
Some of that baby fat to go over.
Yeah. But no, I think that this is a completely, like, crazy life change for Tom Brady. Real quick, I want to get to this question because we got a comment, and I think it makes for a great question.
Oh boy!
Here,
right.
you can comment on YouTube or Twitter, the Chico Bormann Show, and Joe Kwan. Thank you for your comment. First off, he says, "Awesome show, Chico."
Thank you, Joe.
And he asks, "Do you think Ronnie Hickman will make the roster?" So, fair or foul? I'll rephrase. Ronnie Hickman, former Ohio State defensive back, will make the Browns roster.
Boom. Did you plant this? Nothing against Joe, but this feels like can I squeeze in one more Buckeye before we get out of here with it? Yeah, I'll tell you this. I like the Ronnie Hickman pickup, not just because he's a Buckeye. I'm not that big of a homer like you are. I think Ronnie Hickman can play. I think where they got Ronnie Hickman, I think he's, yeah, I do. I like a lot of those. Think of that. Juan Thornhill. You picked up, I'm blanking on his name, Rodney McLeod, yes. Rodney McLeod. Now, again, Ronnie Hickman hasn't proven anything, and there's a reason why he went undrafted, and I get all of that. But I think that safety room, and now, not only do you add, like, Super Bowl experience, but you're adding Super Bowl experience with a guy who is going to get, we think, the most out of you, and also has Super Bowl experience in Jim Schwartz. And that safety room, as much as we talked about, you know, up front and the front seven, that room needed an upgrade as well. And more than anything, probably just needed guys that A, knew what they were doing, knew how to prepare, B, is going to bring leadership. Now, we thought John Johnson was going to bring leadership, and he didn't bring leadership. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't the reason for all their issues, but he sure as hell didn't help matters. I feel like Juan Thornhill and McLeod are going to, what's the matter, Bo?
Oh, nothing. What? What?
You were going. I thought you were getting the gig. You did plant that, didn't you?
No,
that
no,
was
no.
You with Ronnie Hickman.
No, actually, you mentioned Juan Thornhill, and I was just thinking about how he got the Brownie the Elf logo tattooed on his arm, and that was I saw that on the Browns' Twitter.
Fair or foul?
I mean,
Juan Thornhill getting Brownie.
I feel like that's a gets us sort of thing. Like that's embracing your city, your team. I mean, it's not like totally gets us. Like,
no, it's not a mad. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I hate that term. He gets us, because we've said it for so many years in Berea. Like when Pettin would say, like, you know, we're black and blue division, and we're gonna play like a Brown. Oh, he gets us. Like, you don't have to say much or do much these days to get the old. Well, he gets us. He gets us in Northeast.
You're right. It is tossed around a lot, kind of like how literally doesn't mean literally anymore. You know, it's just like overused, and it takes away from the significance of the word.
Boom, I've never given that much thought. That's why we like to bring you and did bring you on board.
Yeah, that's like Seinfeld episode level nuance, right? Just like that's what every Seinfeld episode is at the end of the day, right? It's just like one small little issue that you expand upon, and it's this overthinking about it, and bam, you've got a great episode.
Why don't we find some dude outside that wants to be strapped to a rickshaw and, you know, up and down? Thought like that.
I was just hearing the one. I just heard the one. I heard the sound from yesterday of like the muffin one, where they don't like
top
the
of the
stump.
muffin to you. That's the exclamation point to one. All right, that is that fair or foul? We done? You got one more Buckeye you want to throw in there?
I mean, I could give you more questions if you want them. I got more.
You got an Art Schleister question that you want to throw in there, Bo?
My mom went to school with Art.
Really?
Yeah.
She gamble with Art?
I can't say that I know of any instances.
She write him letters and no.
I think she had a class with him.
Really? Do
Yeah.
you really have? If you have another question, you can fire away. We got our esteemed owner Ken Miles, and I've got some interesting questions. I really want to find out about that blanket of roses. I'll bet you he's done that. There's a picture of him somewhere in the archives of him sneaking in and getting a picture of him wearing the bed of roses. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, Chico. Well, to put a bow on this one, we'll head to the NBA hard court because you touched on it earlier with Budenholzer, and it gave me the idea that I noticed that he was coming out like he was getting a lot of heat, and I think it just makes sense that when you are so expected to be like to just walk through the Eastern Conference, it makes sense that you would fire him. That being said, I think that they also had a lot of adversity that was really, frankly, out of his control. So is it fair or foul to be strictly blaming Budenholzer for this early exit, Chico?
Oh, to be strictly blaming him is totally foul. But I mentioned this earlier in the show. Boom, when they won the title not long ago, that like Budenholzer has never been accepted in Milwaukee. I mean, that's it, for whatever reason. Now, he has made, I mean, let's face it, even that season when he won the title, there would be so many questions after playoff games like, wow, why did Budenholzer do this? Or, well, okay, well, at least they won the game. So he's never been a guy that has been really welcomed in Milwaukee, even when he's won, and I mean not just one, but won the biggest of them all. So this didn't necessarily surprise me, but to your point, should he be the entire scapegoat? No, it is kind of what happens when you're the head coach. But I think with Budenholzer, just to go back, like he never, even when things were going well, they never wanted to give him any credit. So it only makes sense that they would now say, here's your pink slip, get the hell out of here. So
that'll do it for today's edition of Fair or Foul, Chico.
That will do it for this edition of today's Fair or Foul. We're going to step aside for a couple of moments. When we come back, oh yeah, baby, the 149th Run for the Roses. Forte is the favorite. Does our Ken Miles feel that should be your bet on Saturday, tomorrow evening? Stay tuned to find out. It's all on the way next. The Chico Bormann Show returns right after this on the Big Play Network. And welcome back to the Chico Bormann Show, here live from the studios here at Burke Lakefront Airport on the Big Play Network. We are certainly happy to have you along. You can follow us on Twitter, as many of you I'm sure are. But if you're not, it's very easy. Go to Twitter at Chico Show CLE, and we run the live stream there of the show Monday through Friday, 1 to 3. Also go on YouTube. Type in the Chico Bormann Show, hit subscribe, and you'll be good to go there as well. All right, it is time to talk horses. It's time to talk hats. It's time to talk mint juleps. It's time to talk, well, it's time to talk Kentucky Derby. The 149th Run for the Roses coming up tomorrow. And joining us now earlier in the week here on the Chico Bormann Show, we ran a segment with Ken Miles, who is our esteemed owner. I keep saying esteemed. That's brownie points, Bohm. Brownie, write that down. But we ran a segment earlier in the week talking about Ken and his wife's process getting into the horse racing business, because honestly, it is something that really intrigues me. Like I wouldn't know the first thing about it in terms of getting in and how you get in and who you got to know and, well, how do you get to the Derby? And he really shed some light on that. And if you missed it, you can go and check it out on our website and also at the in the archives. But he joins us now, Ken Miles does, as we get set for the Kentucky Derby. Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes, though. Now we're getting to what many of you, in addition to wanting to hear behind the scenes, really what you want to hear is, okay, who am I putting money on tomorrow, and who's going to make me a fortune? Who's going to allow me to retire? And really, you put all of that in the hands of Ken Miles, and I think that's a good idea. Ken, it's great to have you on here, the Chico Bormann Show once again. How are you, sir?
Well, that was quite an introduction. And I would love to tell you I'm doing great, but you may notice a bandage over my eye here, uh, pickleball injury, and 5 stitches later. So I take no responsibility for anything I'm kidding.
A pickleball
So
injury. Now, was it
pickleball,
was it intentional? Was this like a was there bad blood pickleball, or was it
yeah,
accidental?
down here in Naples, pickleball is a very big sport and it gets pretty intense. I'd like to think it was an accident by my partner, but we were losing at the time, and he may have thought I wasn't uh, keeping my end of the bargain. But all is good, and happy to talk about the most exciting day in horse racing, which is the Kentucky Derby.
Okay, before we get to tomorrow, today is a big day. Obviously, the Kentucky Oaks. Now, that's the fillies, the 3-year-old female horses. Do you have any vested interest in that? I think they're set to go off around like 5:45 or so. Will you be tuned in for that? Like, give us a primer on that, if you would.
Yeah, and it's a great question. A lot of people don't realize it's really a weekend of racing at Churchill as this kicks off what's the Churchill Downs spring season. In horse racing, they call their uh, month races meets. So this kicks off the spring meet, and today is well known for the fillies running in the Oaks, and we had a horse that we were hoping would be there this year. Her name is Pep Rally. But as I said on the last show I was on, there's 36,000 3-year-olds, 36,000 horses born every year, and you can only be a 3-year-old in the Oaks or in the Derby or the Preakness or the Belmont, some of these races. And she got injured early on. So no, we have no horses running in the Oaks itself, but we have a lot of friends that have horses and trainers and jockeys that are all at Churchill Downs. But something to keep your eye on is there's been an interesting development with horses this week at Churchill, and I don't know if all the fans are aware, but were you going to talk about that?
Were there a couple of deaths or whatever, and then one of the trainers is under suspicion? Am I right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, our horse In Due Time that qualified for the Derby last year, his jockey was named Paco Lopez. And we've gotten to know Paco very well. In fact, last week when Mary, my wife, was at Gulfstream Park in Florida, she saw Paco. One of our horses was running. Paco was riding him. And she wished him luck in the Derby. As fate would have it, he was riding a horse named Lord Miles. Now, no connection to me whatsoever, just a coincidence.
That's another name that I call you, in addition to our esteemed. But yeah, Lord Miles.
No, for the record, I don't walk around wanting to be called Lord Miles.
No, you don't.
But we thought it was a very interesting coincidence, and he was going to be a long shot, so we were looking forward to putting some money down. But that trainer is Safi Joseph. And something happened this week at Churchill Downs, which you alluded to, which I've never seen before, and frankly, I don't know the details on. But 2 of Safi Joseph's horses died. Now, it's one thing when a horse dies because they're running on the track and they fall and they have a serious injury, and maybe they have to be euthanized on the spot because those legs are so fragile that there's not much blood flow and it's very hard for them to heal. They get infections, and it's a very long, painful process for the horse. So unfortunately, in those situations, which does occur, not often, but does occur, you euthanize the horse, and that's just understood. And I know animal rights activists are upset about it, but you got to understand this is what these horses are trained to do. This is what they wanted to do. They'd be unhappy standing in a field. They'd be running around, racing amongst themselves, and could fall and break their legs just as easily there. So it happens. But anyway, with these 2 horses from Safi Joseph, they didn't get hurt. One was done with his workout, walking back to the stall, and just keeled over. So that's suspicious. And then another horse, similar situation, was just walking and keeled over. So now they didn't die because of injuries. Something was gone wrong, and I don't want to create any rumors or start any
I kind of want you to, though.
I don't want to go
It's
down
good
any
for our
path of
content.
seriousness or anything illegal, but
Yeah.
Churchill Downs said, "Look, that's unprecedented. We never seen that happen before." Safi Joseph, who is a very good trainer. In fact, we had actually had some discussions with him training some of our horses. Never had a record of anything like this going on before, but that's just too coincidental. So something's up there. So as a result of that, Churchill suspended him, which meant, and he had a couple other horses that were going to run today and in the other races tomorrow, because there's 12 races tomorrow. And so Churchill Downs said, all your horses are out, including Lord Miles and now Paco Lopez.
Okay, let me ask you something about that, though, because and you described it perfectly. That's and certainly better than I could as far as how it went down. I guess the thing that is surprising to me, and you said, and you're into this, all year and have been 4 years, that you haven't really heard of anything quite like this. At the same time, though, didn't I read where they're still waiting to get the blood work back? So it almost seems like it's a preemptive, like, all right, we're gonna presume you're guilty before you're innocent. Now I know, look, any kind of shady dealings, they're gonna have the antennas up. I get that, but am I right that they haven't gotten the blood work back yet, and he's still suspended?
Yeah, so that's the tough thing, and for the owners of the in this case Lord Miles, that's a pretty tough way to go when you're just like, wait a second, not found guilty of anything. But the Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Racing Commission were all behind this. They can't take a chance with anything bad happening because, right now the Kentucky Derby is watched by 1 billion people around the world.
Yep.
And I don't know if you remember, I think this was 2019, 2018, before we went into the COVID days. There was a terrible situation where there was almost a pileup of horses coming down the home stretch. A lot of people don't realize this. Tyler Gaffleone, who also rides for some of our horses, and I'll get to him later on because he's a horse to watch. He's riding a horse to watch. He was the guy that probably saved horse racing. A lot of people don't know this. He probably saved horse racing because 1 billion people around the world are watching. And the horse in front of him stumbled, and it created his horse to stumble. And had Tyler not made an instinctive move to get out of the way and actually almost jump and put himself in danger.
I remember
to keep
that.
A pile of horses happy. You would have seen, because this was the horse that was in the front was the one that stumbled, and Tyler was right behind them. Had those two horses gone down, you would have seen a pileup of 10, 12 horses, because they're all right on top of each other coming down the home stretch. You would have seen broken limbs on horses. You would have seen flailing on the track. You would have seen injured jockeys. And unfortunately, we just had a situation at Thistledown this week with a jockey that got injured, thrown from his horse. And so it's very touch and go. You don't want to see anything bad happen. So again, maybe a little long-winded here. I think they said we can't take any chances on anything happening with this horse in front of 1 billion people.
And they've been to take it a step further, and I think we discussed this a little bit in our piece earlier in the week. There are a lot of questions, there's a lot of skepticism around the industry right now in terms of, hey, is everything on the up and up? And so I guess that also goes into it. If that's not the case, maybe Joseph is still allowed to, but that struck me as odd.
Tough. Here's another thing that's happening. And one of the reasons why Mary and I even got into this business, and we did a lot of homework on it, because there was a time back years and years ago where this was really looked at as an industry where I'll put it this way, it was not necessarily on the up and up.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's really tried to clean up its act. It is really a fun sport. These animals really are treated like kings and queens. And when it's done the right way, it's fantastic for everybody. And there's a lot of us that are lobbying for it, and I'm one of the people that is lobbying for it. We need a national body in charge of horse racing. Like you have the NFL, you've got a commissioner, Major League Baseball commissioner, all the major sports. There's nothing like that in horse racing.
So it's like college sports.
Governed state by state.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you have these horses that run in California. There's a different set of rules in California than Kentucky. You're allowed to take certain steroids in California that you can't take in Kentucky. So, and certain drugs and things that you can put in the horse. And a part of it too is just to reduce inflammation, help the horse have better breathing. Bob Baffert got into some trouble with Medina Spirit a couple years ago because he had a steroid that was legal in California that was not legal in Kentucky 72 hours before the horse race. And a Medina Spirit who won had a trace amount of it in his system and ultimately was disqualified. That owner lost $2 million and some significant breeding value in that horse. Did that make a difference to the race? No. But is that truly a rule? Yeah, in Kentucky it is. So that's why, given what I've just said about the industry as a whole, they're going to err on the side of caution, which unfortunately cost in this case Cassie Joseph the trainer and his horses.
All right, we're talking to Ken Miles again. The 149th Run for the Roses coming up tomorrow. Post time right around 6:45, as Ken mentioned. And sometimes if those that don't know or don't follow it, you think it's just one race. It's the Derby. You have the 12 races, and I think the Derby is actually like the 8th race. Am I right about that?
You know what? I didn't look to see where it is on the card.
Usually,
it's near the end.
Right.
Because of all the fanfare and everything that goes on.
Okay, so looking at this field, and we say it every year, and you said it earlier in the week when we talked to you about, hey, it's always wide open. Well, certainly it's wide open because you have a lot of horses at the Kentucky Derby, the 20 entry, so it lends itself to being very, very wide open. But right now, all we're hearing, and this is, I guess this happens every year. Forte. Hearing a little bit about Tapit Trice, 5-1. Angel of Empire, 8-1. But pretty much those 3 horses are all we're hearing about. So give us an idea why Forte is such a heavy favorite, and then could there be a few long shots in there for people to maybe get a little action on?
Sure. Let me preface this by, this is all done in fun and in good spirit.
Yes.
And certainly I have no inside information, and it's not that nobody is going to do anything to construct the race in a certain fashion. So this is just left up to opinions. But when you're at the track and you talk to other owners and the trainers, you get a feel for what's going on. And as I said last week or on the last show, and I think you've been saying it online too, you got to remember the Kentucky Derby is for 3-year-olds. These horses have only raced 3-4 races. So they're still very early on in their careers. They really don't mature fully till they're 4 years old. So they're young. So they could have good days, bad days. You hope it's not a bad day when your horse is running in the Kentucky Derby. It's also the first time many of these horses have ever run at Churchill Downs, which has a certain type of dirt. Although these horses race on dirt all the time, the dirt consistency is a little different. Picture the dirt being thicker. And one trainer said this to me, and it stuck with me. He said, picture, Ken, you might be a fast runner, but all of a sudden you're running on maybe some ice. You don't run as fast if you're not as confident. If these horses don't feel confident in their footing, it doesn't matter what the jockey does. They're not going to run fast because they're going to try and protect themselves. It's nature. They don't want to get injured. So you have to worry about that. It's the first time they've ever run against 19 other horses. And in this case, because there was 4 scratches, we're only going to have 19 horses, not 20 in the Derby this year. But they've never run against a field that big. And they've never run in front of 250,000 screaming people. And that energy and that throng puts so much adrenaline through them that you have to know that they can run this far a distance. A lot of them will burn out. There's many times you see in the Derby, these horses go up to the front, they look great, and then they just collapse down the home stretch. That's what happened last year when Rich Strike won. So a lot of things you have to keep in mind. That said, why is Forte getting a lot of run? He's run some good races. He's won some big races, and he's on a winning streak. But I'm not confident that he can go the distance. The Kentucky Derby, with all that said, is you got to have the speed, but you got to have the endurance. And so one of the things as an owner you look for is, what does the bloodline say? And in the case of Forte, he's got a speed mother and a speed father. Neither one was really bred for distance. Does that mean he can't run this distance? No, it certainly doesn't. You see that all the time. But you don't see in his lineage something that says this horse can be fast and go the distance. And so he's going to get a lot of money. Bet on him because people are talking about him. I just don't think it's a good bet. Could he win? Sure, he could win. But why not, when you're going to have fun with this, let's first look for something that's maybe a little bit more out of the ordinary.
Amen.
And try to make some money on those.
So, okay, Tapit Trice, Angel of Empire. I mean, put it this way. Those two are also getting a lot of talk. About those, but is there somebody like in that 12, 15, 20 to 1 range that you like? I'm almost certain that there's one of those horses in there. That
Sure, there is. So your Tapit Trice, I really like him. Luis Saez is on the mount. He's definitely good. Tapit Trice comes from his dad is Tapit. He's one of the most famous sire horses. In fact, one of our horses, Tepu's father is Tapit. So Tapit Trice is actually a half brother of one of our horses. So we like him there. You'll notice him. He's gray. A lot of people don't realize Tapit. They recognize the name famous horse, but he's gray. So when you see the horses tomorrow, you're going to right away jump out. He's a gray horse. He'll be easy to follow him. He's not really a front runner. He comes from behind. So depending upon how the trip goes, he could get a run. Interesting note on him: he was the most expensive yearling bought. He was bought for $1.3 million. So his owners have a lot invested in him, and he's coming from the number 5 spot. Here's why that's interesting: the number 5 spot has won the Kentucky Derby 10 times, more than anybody else. So, and people say, does it really matter? Yeah, it really matters when you have 19 horses or 20 horses that are all running. If you're in that first spot, and in this case, there's a horse named Hit Show in the first spot, Brad Cox trainer. It's a terrible draw. Here's why. If that number 1 horse doesn't go right out to the front out of the gate, oh, by the way, he's got to stand in the gate the longest. Very hard with all that excitement to stand in the gate,
right,
and not get riled up and be ready to fire right when that gate opens. If you're in that 1 spot, that number 2 spot, even the number 3 spot, if you don't fire when that gate opens, that throng of horses gets in front of you, and now you're pressed against the rail, and you got to go through all that to get around them to get back in the front. It's a tough ride for the jockey. He might say, okay, I'll stay along the rail because it's a shorter distance, because if you got to swing way out, you're running way more than 1.25 miles, and it's hard. And again, remember, these horses haven't raced with that big a field. The dirt that's getting kicked up on their face, some horses can't react to that. It's a different style of dirt, like I said. So tough post position 1, 2, and 3. But Tapit Trice in number 5, that always seems to be a good spot. So you got to keep him as a consideration.
Okay, some of the longer shots.
Yeah. By the way, at the end, I'm going to give you my picks.
Oh, okay.
You're going to hear people talk about Angel Empire. He's got some lineage. I like him. But here's my horse I think everybody's got to look at. Derma Sadogaki, coming from Japan.
Ooh,
now,
10 to 1.
A lot of people don't like these horses that travel so far. Normally I don't, because it's very tough to travel. In fact, that's a whole other show on what it's like to have a horse traveling from across the world. But he's got an interesting story. He comes from Sunday Silence was his grandfather, and Sunday Silence was a Triple Crown winner. Actually, Kentucky Derby winner, I should say. He's a very dominant sire. He was bought and went over to Japan, and he's become the number 1 sire in Japan. And so Derma's got a very strong story. Well, they knew they wanted to get in the Kentucky Derby and have to travel, so they went to Dubai. They wanted Dubai. They went to Saudi Arabia. They wanted Saudi Arabia. This horse continues to get stronger and stronger. So he's got a history of traveling. And the jockey, Christopher Lenier, and I didn't really know who he was, he's the number 1 jockey in Japan in the last 5 years. He's been riding him. They brought him to Churchill Downs on April 17th. He's been there the longest of all other horses. He's trained on the track more than the other horses. His practice times have been good. And so I think he's a sleeper. You might hear the announcer saying, Japanese horses don't travel. I'm betting on Derma Sadogaki. Actually, is my number 1 play.
Like, you've got him to win it all. You've got him to
win it all. Matter of fact, I'm going to put up $100, and I've got 5 horses. I'm not going to try and do anything exotic. I'm not trying to do parlays, trifectas, doubles.
Yep.
You can do that. You can have fun. But I think, given the odds, I got 5 horses: Dormo Satagaki, Tapit Trice, Angel of Empire, and then 2 more that are going to have some long shots. 2 fills, which actually has one of the fastest speed ratings out of any of the horses in his races there. And I really like him because he's won at Churchill Downs before. So he's gone through the paddock area. He's gone through the prep of a race. He stood in the Churchill Downs gates. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize that these starting gates are different too. These horses have a lot of personality and they're quirky. And so he's used to it. He's won there. I like I like everything about 2 fills as a long shot. And then my last one is Verifying. He's come on strong lately. He's the sleeper pick. It's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 15-1 odds. His dad was the Triple Crown winner, Justify. And Justify's got a lot of winners. He's going to come out of the gate quickly. Let's see. He's running in the.
He's running 2, isn't he?
Yeah, he's number 2. So he's going to have a tough spot unless he gets out fast. Here's where he does well, though. He gets out fast, but he runs very well in the 4th and 5th position. He's a pocket runner. And a lot of times when you're those inside horses, as I said, those outside horses come sweeping in, the number 5 post, number 6 post. If your horse isn't comfortable being in the pocket, he won't do well. Verifying has run in the pocket on all his races that he's done well and won, and you've had to win to get here. So he's my sleeper. So repeating: Dermo, Angel Empire, Tapit Trice, 2 fills, and Verifying. I'm putting $20 on each one of them to win. And I feel like the winner's in there.
What now? Last, I don't know, a few days ago they were saying there could be rain. It looks like it's beautiful there today, and it looks like it's going to be that way tomorrow and warm. Is that what you're hearing too?
Yeah. By the way, let me give you a couple other things too. If you're one of those bettors and you're waiting to watch how those horses look, this is why it pays on the Kentucky Derby. Anytime you go to a horse race, go to the paddock and see the horses in the paddock parade. In fact, whenever our horses are running, Mary and I are down there. One of the things we're looking for is, how's that horse looking? Is his ears up? Are they perky? If they're perky, he's doing well. If they're down like this, he's nervous.
I say that about Bohm here. Yeah, that's kind of Bohm has that
exactly.
same. Yeah.
Another thing you want to look at too: are they overheating? If they're sweating, if you see that horse breaking out in perspiration and sweating heavily, not a good sign. And if you remember too, and I told you on the last show, one of our horses unfortunately got a little too excited as a male.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that either. And if for some reason that happens, don't bet him.
Well, did somebody sneak a teaser in there before?
Yeah, we mentioned that. I think these horses, to get to this point, have figured out how to at least get to the starting gate. But again, you never know. They've never been in front of a crowd. And we've all been to sporting events. Hey, it's one thing when you go to you go to Progressive Field and there's 10,000. It's quite another when there's 45,000. You just walk in, you feel the energy.
Yeah,
it's no different. Picture 250,000 people.
Oh,
it's
man.
the largest sporting event in the country attended in person. It's an energy like you can't even imagine, and those horses feel it. So
you feel it. You remember? I remember you saying in your mind, it'd be kind of like, playing in the Ryder Cup and because those guys really do get nervous for that event. Playing in the Ryder Cup, standing on the first tee and going, please, just don't hit a worm burner. Just get it in the air. And you probably say that when you're walking across there, like, don't trip, because 250,000 people and a billion more are watching.
Right. Another thing too, and this is for people to watch, when you have that many horses coming out of the gate, they start bumping into each other. These horses aren't used to being bumped and hit hard. You got 19 horses jockeying for position. They're all alpha males. They all are trying to get there. They're not going to mind bumping into one another. Again, that's where the jockey, Tyler Gaff-Leone, he's one of the top jockeys out there. And he's on Verifying, by the way. That's one of the reasons why I like him too. You can't count out Tyler. As I said, he saved probably horse racing a couple of years ago. So he knows how to handle a horse that's going to get bumped in that number 2 spot. That's why I like throwing some money on him. But watch for all the bumping and the hitting that's going to take place when those horses come out of the gate. It takes till they get to that first turn for things to settle down, and then they get in the pocket and run.
Okay. Last thing for you. Now we know that for big events, boxing events, we've known that you've been known to don a fur or two. Have you ever? Because when you're an owner, you've got some inside access, whatever. That blanket of roses, which is it's the tradition. The horse that wins gets the blanket of roses on. Have you ever tried to put that blanket on and get a picture? Like if anybody, I could see you trying to do that, Ken. Trying to sneak in there, grab the blanket. Now it weighs a lot. Do you know how much the blanket weighs?
No, I do not. But
40 pounds.
It's massive, and I could tell you, I could do all the sneaking around in the world. I'm not going to get my hands on it. That thing is so coveted, so protected, just like the trophy. However, for anybody that ever goes to Churchill Downs, they have an incredible horse racing museum. If you're a horse racing fan, you got to go to it at Churchill Downs. And in the museum, you could go stand in a starting gate. You could sit on a simulated horse, and you could put a simulated blanket of roses around you and feel what it feels like.
40 pounds the blanket weighs, and for all your buddies tonight, you can wow everybody, Ken. You could say you heard it here on the Chico Bormann Show. 554 roses are on that blanket.
Is that what it is? Wow. I knew it. I was going to say it had to be a lot.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. But the pomp and tradition is really unlike any other. And for somebody, their life's going to change tomorrow. For the owners, it's going to change. If you're a trainer, doesn't matter if you won before. Every time you win a Derby, it's one more notch in the Hall of Fame career. Same thing for the jockeys. But for those owners that own that horse, I mean, you could be looking at, $50 to $100 million in stud fee.
Did Mary settle on a hat, by the way?
Well, so tomorrow, we get invited to a lot of parties. We're down in Naples right now. We get invited to a lot of parties. We don't go. I'm going to have a nice Kettle One martini, Little Dirty with some blue cheese olives. Mary's going to have the cheese and crackers out. And we're just going to enjoy on our couch, watching in front of the big screen, this incredible event.
What was that order on the martini? I think you ordered that the other night.
Kettle One, Little Dirty, blue cheese olives.
Works for me. Ken Miles, boy, great stuff, buddy. Not only today, but earlier in the week, kind of behind the scenes look. It's going to be fun. I do love it. Like I said, my grandfather was a huge lover of the horses. Worked at the Derby in retirement, so we're looking forward to it. And I might have to be if you get any information, the first person you have to text is me, not Dave. Not reflog, not even the wife. You got to let me know about that information. Is that fair?
Well, there's still a lot that's going on, and as I said before, these horses are nervous animals. A couple of horses got scratched this week because they had temperatures. They got temperatures. I don't know. Is there a virus going around over there? Horses can easily get sick.
Mm-hmm.
That could change things. So you want to look for that. Just keep up with it. But I'm going to throw this out, Chico. If you like what we're doing here, maybe we come back and we decide Chico Bormann and big play. Maybe we buy a piece of a horse and see where we go.
I am very, very serious on this. I am, because we did.
Be fun. I think if your fans are interested and you're interested, we should talk about it, because then we could go right to the auction and talk about the horse and just go through the whole process, and then people can really see what it's like from the start, and then you realize how incredible it is and what an honor it is to get a horse even mentioned in the Derby circuit, let alone make it to the Derby.
Bohm's ears just perked up, like we talked about the horses. It perked, so he's excited about that.
He's ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, you should get worried if he breaks out in a sweat.
Or if the other thing happens, like happened to your horse. But we're going to let it go there, because this is a family show here at the Chico Bormann Show on the Big Play Network. Ken, love talking to you as always, buddy. Keep up the great work, and happy Derby. It's going to be a good time tomorrow. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, down the stretch they come.
There you go. All right, that is Ken Miles. Good stuff there. I love the ponies. And so he likes Derma Sotagaki. Hopefully I said that right. And those odds right there, Bohm. I believe he's 12 to 1. I'm looking at, just full disclosure, I'm looking at this looks like CBS. Yeah, 10-1. I'm sorry, 10-1 is where he's at right now. Verifying, he loves the jockey, the son of Verify, who did win it. That's 15-1. The favorite, you heard him say with Forte, doesn't to speed. They were both his mom and his dad were both speed horses, worried about the endurance factor. Again, the Kentucky Derby, 1.25 miles, and you just there's a lot of unknown as far as this goes. Boom, you're chomping at the bit. Pardon the expression, but go ahead.
Chico, I thought that insight was really fascinating, especially on the Japanese horse, tracing back the roots, the lineage, and how he doesn't normally like horses that have to travel long distances, but he backed up his reasoning for why this might be the reason to buy into one traveling from afar come tomorrow. I
will definitely be, for obviously entertainment purposes only. I will be, I'm excited about this. Again, it's always wide open because it is the Derby. But I like the idea of maybe going, because I'm not a big exacta, trifecta, that parlay. Just give me a winner. And, if we can get, and there really are. There's like 3 or 4 there that are in that 10 to 12 to 15-1 range. That makes it so much fun. All right, we will take a break. When we come back, I want to shift gears, get back to football for a moment, because Anthony Walker, who is very, 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 how shall I say, careful with his words, said something, nothing bad, but he said something I thought was very telling. We're going to tell you what that was and talk about it a little bit. And if you want to chime in, hey, maybe you have a pick for the Derby. By all means, give us a call. 216-626-7901. Also, when we come back, we got to think of a name for the horse, because we're definitely going to get in on this buying a horse. Do we name it? Well, we'll talk about it. We'll have a group discussion on it. It is the Chico Bormann Show. Got about a half hour left in the program. Want to hear from you right here on the Big Play Network. All righty, welcome back, and great stuff there. I'm pumped up now. Like I got the juices going for the Kentucky Derby, the 149th Run for the Roses tomorrow. We may touch on that. And again, if you want to, if you have a pick, maybe you disagree with Ken on something, you can certainly do that and get a hold of us before we leave the air at 3. All right, I'm going to get into Anthony Walker and something that he said yesterday that caught my ear. But before I do, boom, I don't know if you are aware of this, because I thought for sure, and I've been holding out, waiting for you to bring this up. Do you know who is throwing out the first pitch at tonight's?
Is it a musician?
It is not a musician. Tonight's Twins-Guardians game. Obviously, game 1 of the 3-game series, very important. Guardians trailing the Twins in the division.
The Russo brothers.
Nope. I'm shocked, but also I'll be honest with you, Bohm, a little disappointment right now that you don't know who it is.
Yeah, now at this point I'm curious. It's not a musician.
It's probably good though, because if you did know, he probably wouldn't be able to make it to the mound in time to get the first pitch off.
Oh, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's one of my boys.
I don't know if he knows that, but yeah, you would say it's one of your boys.
Does he play for the Browns?
No.
Cavs?
No. No law. He doesn't play. May coach.
Former athlete. Oh, coach.
Oh.
Kevin Stefanski.
What was that like?
Is it Kevin Stefanski?
It is not Kevin Stefanski, but he'll probably be at the game tonight. He's had a lot of games.
Does he coach football?
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
The
I
vest.
hit my 20 questions.
The Senator.
The Senator.
Jim Tressel is throwing out the first pitch tonight at the Guardians-Twins game, and I figured, first of all, do we think he wears the sweater vest, right?
He's going to be wearing the Youngstown State sweater vest, I feel like. That's what he does now, right? He's the president.
Yeah, but I think
senator to president.
True. Well, yeah, he may. Yeah, maybe. I figured he might in this case wear the Ohio State one, but yeah, he could. But will he wear a sweater vest? I sense he's going to be. We know he's going to be very buttoned up. Like there won't be any tomfoolery or shenanigans because again, it is the Senator.
No lollygagging with this man.
No lollygagging with Coach Jim Tressel. Now, what I said is, horrible joke, that instead of throwing out the first pitch, Coach will opt to punt the first pitch, which I think would be great if he actually did that. But, yeah, I was shocked. I thought for sure you would know that Jim Tressel was throwing out that first pitch, and then I became concerned that Tressel may not arrive in time because you would be,
too busy bombarding him,
gawking and fanboying.
My praise.
Yeah, that is cool though. I admit, Tressel dude's an icon. I mean, he is an icon. He really is.
Tressel was at the helm when I really fell in love with Ohio State football. That's like the era of nostalgia, the ultimate nostalgia for me. So, yeah, of course, the Senator holds a very special place in my heart.
And what's interesting about it is, and we'll get into the Browns here in just a moment, what's interesting about Jim Tressel, a lot of things, but you talked about your era. So I was there, obviously, when John Cooper was there, and to this day, I swear, I say it, and I mean it, I love Coop, but damn it, he couldn't beat Michigan to save his life, and that's why he ends up losing his job. So they bring in Tressel, and of course we all remember the
speech.
Yeah, the famous quote at the basketball game. I think they're playing Michigan that day, and he says, you'll be proud of us in the community, in the classroom, and most importantly, in I don't know how many days it was.
I'm getting goosebumps, Chico.
In Ann Arbor, when And so right then it endeared. But there were a lot of questions like, wow, that's a big jump. Now he gets it. He certainly loves Ohio State, his dad Lee. And so, I mean, it was like, yeah, he gets it, but is this too much? Is this too much for him to bite off? And is he going to be able, this is Ohio State. And, his methods were, I don't want to say unorthodox. I mean, there's conservative coaches out there, but yeah, I mean, when I joke about punting the first pitch, like, he loved the punt. The punt was not a bad play in Jim Tressel's playbook.
Yes, special teams was higher up on his priority list than most. It is interesting to wonder, though, Chico, like, how would Tressel fare as a coach in today's college football climate? Because, I mean, we saw in 07 how Urban Meyer basically ran him out of the building. And it looked like Tressel was on his way up with, like, recruiting and starting to get more guys, like, from outside of Ohio, better, higher-ranked prospects. And it was kind of a shame to see it all end so abruptly with everything that unfolded with the tattoo gate and everything. But it's just something that I ponder, and I wonder how Tressel could do nowadays.
Yeah, I think, and here's, to me, that's a great question. And I think my answer would be any great coach, and I consider Jim Tressel a great coach, would be able to, even if they're not happy about doing it, would be able to adapt. And I think, you mentioned Urban Meyer kind of blowing the doors off of Ohio State. I remember that game, and really what really changed it, I thought, was, like, we got so caught up in it when we looked at the speed guys in the SEC. It was always about skill positions, right? And which, for the longest time, it still is a big deal. But where the teams like Florida and LSU in the early to mid 2000s, where they were just, running circles, was in the trenches. Like, they had these big guys that weighed 300 pounds that were running, seemed like 4.7, 4.8 40s. And it was like, oh my God. I mean, the athletes they had down there, and as big as they were. And that was, to me, that was the biggest, like, when we talk about, I'd say early to mid, when Ohio State won it all in 2002, which was absolutely amazing, incredible. Like, that was the thing that didn't get enough credit, because everybody was talking. If you remember, I will get to the Browns for a moment. This is definitely going to get me long-winded, but that's okay, because this is one of my favorite teams, favorite moments. But going into that game, Miami's big favorites. They're like 11.5, 12-point favorites, and understood they hadn't lost in like 30-some games. I mean, it was crazy. And everybody's talking about Miami's speed and Andre Johnson and Willis McGahee, and they did. Roscoe Perry. I mean, they had Kellen Winslow Jr. Hopefully he's enjoying a good Friday.
Soldier.
I'm a soldier.
The way that he jerks his head when he says it so adamantly.
Yeah, and by the way, Buckeyes, and I've talked to Dustin Fox about this, they didn't have an answer for him in the second half of that game. Like, it was almost one of those where, God, maybe they went to him too little too late, and thank God for Ohio State, because they had nobody to match. Now, you look at him in college, a guy 6'6", 6'5", with that speed and athleticism. But Miami, they waited to try to exploit that, and man, did they ever. But where that game was won, and Kirk Herbstreit, I'll never forget this, on the pregame show when he picked Ohio State, and of course everybody thought it was a homer call, and he's not. He said, I'm telling you right now, a couple things. One, Miami players, Andre Johnson, Willis McGahee, and others, I think Jonathan Vilma was involved in this, had already sent out party invitations for back in Miami. Oh, I thought you knew this. For back in Miami after the game to party it up. I think it was for like the next night or the 2 nights later, where they were going to just have a big old celebration party. And Ohio State actually got one of these invitations. Somebody got their hands on it.
Oh, no.
And it was like, oh, wow. Not that we need bulletin board material, but check this out. So Herbstreit brings that up, and then I'll never forget his line as they're, before they go to kickoff and they're ending. He goes, Ohio State is going to shock the world because the guys in the trenches, the Will Smiths, he's like, these guys are so athletic and so fast and so strong. Because the other thing about those Miami teams about not losing was also they just don't give up sacks. Ken Dorsey, he's clean as a whistle, and he was. And remember I think it was their first or second possession, and he went down. And it was like, whoa, like Brett Romberg was the Canadian center. And Brett Romberg, I don't think had given up a sack all year, and maybe had given up one in his entire career. And he got beat right away. And all of a sudden, like, you're thinking, oh my God, Herb Street's onto something. And then it ended up being the epic, double OT final, and they win the championship. But I'll never, ever forget that. And, of course, Tressel. I'll never forget, too, Tressel after the game. He looked in the camera, and they're like, he's like, well, we've always had the best damn band in the land. And then he just looks, and total Tressel, mannerism. Now we get the best damn team in the land. The fans just went bonkers, the Ohio State contingent that was on hand. But the way he said it, his eyes just like, we've always had the best damn band in the land. Now we got the best damn team in the land. It was crazy. So,
Chico, I was only 10 years old when that happened, so it's nice to hear your vivid recollection of such a special moment in Ohio State history. And I remember the first time I ever cried over sports was actually 2007, but it was not Calvin Johnson. It was that loss to Florida and being down 41-14 and still having a hope that Ohio State could come back.
Yeah, it was tough. All right, before we get out of here, I want to leave on a good note. And, of course, we got a huge series over at Progressive Field. If I didn't already have plans, I'd be over there tonight. I can tell. I'm planning on going Sunday. This is a big series. But I heard something from Anthony Walker. And, first of all, I think we all love this guy. Like, he is a true leader. He was the guy that was saying, because he missed time last year, and when you bring up the miscommunications in the secondary and the finger pointing, even though he wasn't playing, he's like, hey, put that on me. I'm the Mike linebacker. I'm basically, calling the shots, and you can put that on me even though I wasn't playing. So if anybody is, kind of taking ownership on things, Anthony Walker has. But he's also very smart, and he's also very, there have been a lot of questions about Joe Woods, and, nobody's, and he didn't bite here, but he said something telling. He said, we're going to have a coach this year in Jim Schwartz who is going to hold guys accountable, and that's never a bad thing. And it just made me think, okay? Now, you can say that, and okay, great, well, let's see it. But Jim Schwartz has a track record. And for Anthony Walker to say that, and it wasn't, I don't really take it as a shot at Joe Woods as much as he was trying to compliment Jim Schwartz, or taking a shot at Joe Woods as much as complimenting Jim. But for him to say that just, again, kind of adds a little bit more fuel, maybe the period at the end of the sentence that, you know what, Joe Woods, you can talk about scheme, and he wasn't the only guy to blame by any means. But at the end of the day, accountability. Now, ultimately, that falls on head coach Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah,
but on the defensive side of the ball, if we're talking about the secondary constantly pointing fingers and constantly bickering, which they were, and God knows John Johnson had no problem just trying to fuel the fire, which was amazing to me. There you hear Anthony Walker say, and again, I want to reiterate, I don't think it was a shot at Joe as much as it was, hey, you know what? We're going to have a coach this year. It's going to be holding guys accountable, and that's never a bad thing. That caught my ear yesterday.
It does sound like that accountability is going to be ramped up. However, tough, smart, accountable is an expression that I feel like has stemmed out of Berea well before Jim Schwartz has stepped foot in there. So it is going to be interesting. And, yeah, to your point, I don't think it's shots fired. I only wonder, were they not held accountable before? Even though they have that.
That's exactly what it. Yeah.
How are you going to have an expression like that though, and not follow through with it?
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's why we were so. That's why we became so. Frustrated isn't the word. Kind of just you roll your eyes. I got sick and tired of hearing it because if you're not going to back up those words, and they are just essentially words, then don't say it. Now, again, I think Kevin and Andrew are going to figure it out. I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to be here long term. But, yeah, you know what? Enough of the, Juan Thornhill coming in and banking on his name again, Rodney Rodney McLeod. There you go. Rodney McLeod coming in. Both these guys have Super Bowl experience. Both these guys have been like, yeah, you need guys that are all about winning, know how to win, but know how to get everybody else together and, playing for each other. Jadeveon Clowney, like, I still can't get over that. Like, you chased after this dude like Bohm as a 6th grader at recess, chasing after girls. Like, you chased after him and chased after him and chased after him, not once, but twice. And all he cared about was himself. Hopefully those days are long gone. That's all I can say. Bohm, did you want to add anything about chasing girls at recess and all that? You may still do it now. I don't know.
Chico, I was way too shy to be the girl chaser at 6th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
sure I was playing tag of some sort and chasing people in that regard.
And
6th grade, I don't know, might be post-tag era for me.
Were you a big Ohio State fanatic then, or that didn't really hit until?
It didn't happen until after 02. It was some point between 02 and 07.
Okay.
That Ted Ginn, Santonio Holmes era was like the first one that I really fell in love with. But I remember going to games like even before that. Like I went to games when I was a little kid, seeing Antonio Pittman in the backfield, who you mentioned yesterday.
Yeah, we had Joe Thomas on.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ted Ginn. That game that Wisconsin beat Ohio State, and I mentioned it was like the third straight time they beat them at the Shoe, which was just, to me, amazing. And Joe was on that Wisconsin team and was, I think, paved the way for Anthony Davis to run over like 150. Do you know the only touchdown they had in that game was Ted Ginn on a punt return? Like, they didn't do anything offense. The guys you mentioned, Ted Ginn, Santonio Holmes only had like 48 yards. Justin Zwick, no touchdowns. Like that Wisconsin defense just shut them down.
Wisconsin always notorious for having one of the best defenses in the Big Ten.
Always physical. Yep. Oh, no doubt about it. All right. We are out of here. Good stuff today. Again, thanks to Ken Miles, not only our esteemed boss, sometimes I refer to him in the paddock and elsewhere as Lord Miles. Unfortunately, he was scratched.
Not Ted Kaczynski, though.
The horse was scratched, not Ken Miles. Well, he was scratched. The horse was scratched, Lord Miles, and Lord Miles' pickleballer was also scratched.
Should have worn his hood and shades, maybe could have covered up the Band-Aid.
You really love that hoodie.
I can't look at it, Chico. It just cracks me up. It's like I can't believe we have the Unabomber on our wall.
You know what's even better about it is Miles is over it would be his Nick Padone's left shoulder. Doesn't that just make it even more like
just creeping over Padone's shoulder?
It's hilarious.
Look out!
Absolutely hilarious. All right, so we're out of time. Thanks to Ken. Enjoy the Derby tomorrow. Again, he likes Derma Sotagake. Hope I said that right, the Japanese horse. But that'll be happening tomorrow. And again, big series, big homestand, 9-game homestand beginning tonight for your Guardians. But, man, this is a biggie, albeit early, against the Minnesota Twins, as it's Battenfield tonight against Bailey Ober. But we're going to see Sonny Gray. We're going to see Joe Ryan. So, yeah, Guardians got to get going and got to get going. Let's do it tonight. I'm Mike Chico Bormann. We'll do this again coming up on Monday at 1 o'clock. Until then, the weather's beautiful. Home team's in town. Run for the roses tomorrow. I know you will make it a great weekend, everybody. See you.